Hey Bandidos, today I'm going to share with you my legendary striker build for both solo and group play. So we've been doing a lot of legendary runs lately. I've been doing them both solo and I've been doing legendary speedruns for the average Joe in groups. And of course, people have been asking me what DPS build I'm using when I do these activities. And for now, the build that I'm really liking for legendary DPS is my all red striker build. And this is what it looks like. It's not necessarily a new build per se, but I think the way that I'm running it is probably a little bit more unique than how most people put together their legendary striker builds. For the most part, it's all red and it's crit based, okay? But what I've done is I've actually taken in some of the concepts that are coming from like a Heartbreaker setup. And what I mean by that is that I'm using pulses and technician, and I'll go into why that I'm doing that. But one of the things I want to emphasize first is that when it comes to DPS builds for legendary, striker is my go-to over Heartbreaker or Umbra or ongoing directive, negotiator's dilemma, or anything like that. For heroic content, I would probably give you a different answer than that. Before I get into the details of the actual build, take a quick look at this all red Heartbreaker setup. An all red Heartbreaker is actually pretty close in DPS and crit value as a all red striker build. And a lot of people run this build, and this has been a popular setup since Heartbreaker was released. So Heartbreaker of course gives you assault rifle damage, weapon handling, and then weapon damage and bonus armor. But for this build setup, it really minimizes the bonus armor, and that's what makes Heartbreaker special. But you do get a little bit, and that little bit does help. With this setup, I'm running spotter and vigilance for the backpack. Everything else has crits, and then I have the Kingbreaker weapon as well as technician. And so that's what I mean when I say that my striker setup sort of pulls in some of the concepts for Heartbreakers. And the reason why I'm doing that is because legendary tech, it brings in warhounds, tanks, and I feel like that the spotter talent, you know, with that 20% amplified damage and flatline for another 20% amplified damage is a really strong thing to use against all the enemies, including tech. And then the technician specialization gives you the skill tier, but also additional damage to those robotics like tanks and warhounds. And that makes it really, really nice to run this because you can use those elements to create your stacks for striker. So one of the big differences with the striker build versus Heartbreaker is that when you see a tank, it's like welcoming for you because you know you can use it to build some massive stacks while destroying it at the same time. Where with the Heartbreaker setup, when you focus on tanks, you actually don't get any stacks. So your stacks are degrading against those tanks. So let me quickly show you what this thing can do. Just building those stacks up real fast, and as you can see, we got them. And then I switched to the Kingbreaker, and as you can see, I run the 8x scope by default, so I'm always using that, and there's really nice crit value there, over 1.7 million. So really, really nice. And with this setup, you're basically doing a DPS of 15 million. So let's show you that. Yeah, so this is a 15 million DPS, 1.7 million crit damage. I'm running the Kingbreaker, which is the named TK, and I run mine a little bit different. So I do run the Omega suppressor so that I have more stability. I play on the Xbox, so this is a little bit helpful for me. And so that's 20% more stability at the cost of optimal range. And then I run the laser pointer. You only get this if you run the technician specialization, and I'm using it to activate the pulse, and that's for the talents on the chest and the weapon. And then I like to run the 8x scope. Now, for two reasons. One, I can do the shield peak strategy, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. You have to have a zooming scope in order to do that. And two, I really like the extra 30% headshot damage, and I find, especially in legendary content, that the 8x scope is not super zoomed in. As a matter of fact, I can do point blank against the Chungas with an 8x scope and just bust through their helmets really nicely and then kill them really quickly. Otherwise, I got the larger mag and, of course, the motherboard skin. It's got damage to targets out of cover, 748 RPM. This is one of the strongest assault rifles in the game. Lines up really well with the AKM. That's another option you can go with. But for flatline, this one gives us the perfect version for 20% amplified damage to pulse enemies. And then the chest piece that I'm running is the perfect closer chest piece. I got mine all red with crits across it all. And then I'm running perfect spotter, and that's 20% amplified damage again. So that's a total of 40% amplified damage. Very nice. You can also run obliterate. Obliterate is total weapon damage. This is amplified damage. This doesn't require you to stack. Obliterate does. Obliterate's a great option option if you want to go with it, but this is just always active. I know the only thing is it requires you to run Technician, but I want to run Technician because I'm doing Legendary, and Technician gives me additional damage against those robotics, and I get the skill tier, which is also powering up my skills a little bit more. It makes my shields a little bit tankier, and that is helpful. But anyways, I'll show you about the shield. We're not really using it for too much defense, but when I'm doing Legendary speedruns, yes, it does provide a nice barrier for me. When I'm running solo Legendaries, I'm using the shield to allow me to do the shield peek, which gives me a wider view on the right-hand side when I'm standing behind cover, and allows me to continue to fire without taking damage. And then I use the assault turret to just basically take aggro for me. That's all it's doing, is just distracting enemies. So for the mask, I decided to go with Cheska. I was getting better values running Cheska than I was running the Contractor's Gloves or Fox's Prayers, and that's to help us get to our crit threshold. So we're at 56% crit chance and then 105% crit hit damage. This is how I like to run my Legendary build. Very powerful, very strong. You're going to use an armor kit from time to time, but for the most part, we're well protected, and you'll see that in the gameplay. Okay, otherwise, everything else is Striker, and it's all red with crits. So this one is got crit chance on it. And of course, we get weapon handling, additional rate of fire, and then Striker's Gamble, which is giving us 100 stacks of total weapon damage. And then the knees are with crit damage, the gloves are with more crit damage, and then the backpack is all crit chanced up. And so the backpack, it gives you risk management, which basically increases that total weapon damage value from 0.65 to 1%. So you know, that's basically like running Vigilance. Did test this against Vigilance, and they were both giving me approximately the same DPS values. And so you could go with Vigilance, and the only difference is if you take damage, then Vigilance is deactivated. If you're looking to be part of a strong, positive community, then I have you covered. Join us on Discord. We're not elitists, and we're so much more than just clans and raids. Tux's Discord continues to grow as the central hub for the player base that loves this game and wants to see it thrive. And if you love builds, this is the spot. And join Tux's Players Club to support the channel and the cause while getting access to member perks and extra content, like gaming music playlists. Click the join button below. Now, you don't have to run the 8x scope to do everything you're gonna see. So I'm just gonna let you know that right now, but I do like that 30% headshot damage, and it makes things go a little bit faster just running the scope. But you can also run this 3.4 times scope. Okay, it's gonna give you a little bit more crit chance, so that's a little bit helpful. That will allow you to shift some crit hit damage, but the 30% headshot damage is really hard to beat. But this will give you the variable zoom, or if there are moments you don't wanna play in zoom, then this gives you that option. The difference being is you know, you gotta click, so that's just adding a step. By running the 8x scope, I get more damage out of my build, and I also eliminate a step. And here's something I gotta say that might help your stash situation as well. So when it comes to these gear sets, these DPS assault rifle orientated gear sets like Negotiators, Striker, Heartbreaker, Ongoing Directive, or when it comes to these gear sets, I gotta say that, you know, if you're gonna start adding blues, you know, or armor regen or armor on kill to your Striker build, then you might as well just run Heartbreaker or even Umbra, because they come with that defensive attribute already while giving you high levels of DPS. Where Striker is designed to really be an all red build, and its reward is that high level of DPS. It's giving you the highest DPS value out of really all of those. In exchange, you don't have any added survivability to that. But as soon as you start adding armor, and as soon as you start adding armor regen and armor on kill, what you start doing is taking away damage from Striker and putting it to the levels of Heartbreaker, which is right behind Striker. So you know, an all red Heartbreaker is right behind Striker, and closer to an Umbra build, which is, you know, easy. So it makes it easy to say. It's just like you might as well run Umbra, or you might as well run Heartbreaker, or something like that. And so I really encourage you when it comes to Striker builds to really just, you know, stick with an all red build concept, you know, for legendaries especially. I was running, like, for a solid week, I really got into this Heartbreaker build, and I was running it solo legendary at District Union Arena, and I was getting really far with it as well, all the way to the end. But when I switched to the Striker build, it just became a lot easier. The biggest differentiator is what it can do against tanks. And so I use the tanks in legendary to build those stacks, and that goes a long ways when you're trying to complete a legendary quickly. So my recommendation is to not run an all red Heartbreaker build. So I'm giving up on this all red Heartbreaker setup. I just don't think it's worth it. If you're gonna go all red, just go Striker and put on Technician. You know, just go that way, just the way that I'm running it.
Follow me.